and welcome to the Big Happy Life podcast, the very first one on video and the first one back in, 4 months? My God, and everything's changed. How are you doing? Things are so different for all of us, and it's been a crazy year and a completely mind-blowing last 4 months or 5 months. And I imagine it's the same for you because everything is so different. So what I wanted to record is an episode about how we think about things and how that changes our experiences. I have never found it to be more true than through the coronavirus lockdown, because all of the other noise of life was taken out. I don't know what happened with you. For me, all of my work dried up instantly. There was nothing. And so it was just me, my husband, the kids, all home. And my husband was still working, but the kids were home from school. I wasn't working. And it sort of reduced the noise of life. But, outside of our four walls, of course, there's that imminent and constant threat. So for a little while, I was checking the coronavirus numbers, that Worldometer website. So I must have gone on that every 10, 15 minutes, checking the numbers. They're rolling. And, if I'd stopped to watch a TV program or something in the evenings, in the time it took me to watch a TV program, another 600 people would die. And I was just getting myself absolutely obsessed with it and thinking about, I could see the coronavirus coming to our door. And I was getting myself in a right state about it. And I also noticed when I took the noise out of, the interactions my kids would normally have and how that features in their behavior and just the different influences we have in our lives. When it was just me, my husband, and our kids in the house, the impact we had on each other was much more evident. It was much easier to see the different patterns in the things the kids pick up and how what I'm thinking about and what I'm doing and saying affects them and shows up in their behavior or in their questions and their thoughts. And so that's really what this episode is about, is the effect of our thoughts on our experiences, on the level of fear we experience, the level of stress we experience, and how that ultimately impacts what we choose to do and how we feel. So it's not a new idea, the whole idea that mindset and thought processes affect feelings and behavior. If you've done any kind of self-development, that's not going to be news to you. But what I came to realize is how much control I have over what I'm putting into the mix. So like I said, I was watching the news. I was constantly on websites that were reiterating that fear of what was happening and keeping it alive in my mind, making it bigger and stronger. And so what I thought was appropriate or important was shifted in the direction of fear, because that was what I was seeking out as the information I was putting in. The people I was talking to were the people who were more frightened. And, we'd whip each other up into a little bit of a, what if? And so that was probably, I'd say, the first week or two of lockdown. And I think, a little part of me really enjoyed the drama of it. That's an awful thing to say, but it's true. I was quite intoxicated by the possibility that this was, the apocalypse. Like it was about to be Armageddon and everything was going to be over. And yeah, I sort of imagined our own little version of The Walking Dead. So our zombies would be the coronavirus. So it just got me thinking about how difficult we can make things for ourselves if we allow information in that causes us to make decisions in a fear-based direction. In just the same way, I sort of followed that pattern of thought through to some of the other areas of my life. If you've listened to the podcast before, you know that I can chase my tail about all kinds of things, about, earn more money, go and do this, go and do that. That's important now. But what I started to think about during lockdown was how those thoughts, decisions, and beliefs are impacted by the kinds of things I'm reading, the people whose social media I'm following, the information I'm taking in about what it means to be successful or to be happy or to have a fulfilling life, all of those sorts of things. And so I started thinking about being much more intentional about the feelings I'm trying to create in my life on a day-to-day basis. So that's the first thing that I wanted to make as a kind of practical action item from this podcast, is to really think about, what do you want your life to feel like each day? Because so many of us are thinking about tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What do we want to have achieved? What is the big goal? What is life going to be like then? But what I found for myself is that in those patterns, I'm kind of killing myself today for some kind of utopian tomorrow. And that's not really helping very much. So by thinking about what today is supposed to feel like, and still have my eye on what I want to build in the future, but to think about, well, I'd like to build it in such a way that I enjoy the build, rather than I kind of claw my way through life until I get to this kind of happy end result, where then I will have time for my kids, and then I will have an opportunity to rest and to enjoy doing the things I enjoy doing. So how you go about the process of creating the life you want is often determined by whatever you're letting in. And when so much of the outside world got shut out during lockdown, and I got to sense the power of my own thoughts and the power of the things I was letting in, it made me think carefully about what to let in. And that's the second thing to think about as you go forward, if you take anything from this podcast, is, what do you want to let in? How do you want those things to allow the shaping of your thoughts and your beliefs? Because I don't know about you, but I find once the thoughts are in and once the loops are running, they aren't as easy to control. It's a lot of times your thoughts kind of happen involuntarily. They pop into your mind and they can hijack whatever you're doing. So it seems to me to make much more practical sense to think about the sources of thought and the ways in which we gather and shape how our thoughts form in our minds. And when we start playing with that, it's almost like you go back to the source and you change it, and that puts something else into the mix. And so that's what I've been working on over the last few months. I stopped watching the news altogether, possibly went a bit ostrich about that, but I instantly found myself able to maintain perspective. So it became easier to think about the reality of our situation, the four of us in this house, and think about following the protocols we were given, making sure we stayed in as much as possible. Only one of us, either my husband or I, went out for groceries. Everything else we just managed as we were told to do. We went out and exercised each day, but we stayed away from other people. And actually it became quite fun, where previously every time we encountered people, I felt a sense of threat. This time, once I stopped watching the news and I stopped worrying quite so much, when we encountered people, we stepped aside. But in my mind, it was more about connecting and saying hello, because the whole situation seemed so strange and so weird that that feeling of wanting to build community spirit and just smile at each other felt more important, and I felt more able to do those things. So it's tiny little things, but they make such a big difference to what does end up popping into your mind and what does float to the surface as being important and valuable in that moment. So with everything going on in your life right now, if you can take a step back and think about all the things you're letting in, all the origins or sources of the thoughts and beliefs that you power yourself with each day, how well are they serving you? And if they're not, what would you change? What would you look at more, focus on more? And what would you look at and focus on less? And how will that affect the balance of what you notice, what you believe, and what you experience? I'd love to know what that sparks for you. Please leave a comment below if there's anything you think, oh, I'm definitely going to do more of this or less of that. Let me know what that is. I'm really curious to see the patterns in some of your thoughts and where this leads you. Next week, I'll share with you a little bit more about my applications and how I'm putting this into practice, and also how it has spawned this kind of side branch of Big Happy Life and this really cool little project that I'm working on. But I'll tell you all about that next week. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Oh, and thanks for watching.